Hi there, my name is Chris, and I just gave this presentation today, and I'm going to choose to record this one just so we have a copy for our purposes today. And I want to say thanks for tuning in. We're going to be talking about how OpenID Federation can help the AI identity, trust, and provenance kind of space. So let's get started. A little bit about me. My name is Chris, and I'm an independent identity architect. I've been a serial collaborator in standards and federated ID spaces for over a decade now. I've been working in the research and education space with Multilateral Federation, SAML, and roaming Wi-Fi radius with eduGAIN. And I'm also a contributor to IdPro as well as certified IdPro. So a lot of experience, as well as just recently founded a VeriMe.coop, which is an identity verification service for researchers, me and my other co-founders. For today's topic, we're going to get into some of expanding the worldview on, or your and my worldview on OpenID Federation, and how we can talk about identity and how we can improve things. We've done a ton of things in our existing ecosystem of the regular web, or Web 2.0, I think, it's often referred to as. And in the AI space, it hasn't necessarily been passed on. So this conversation today is meant to have a lot of just expansion in getting people's understanding of OpenID Federation, where it can plug in. So let's get started. Some of the challenges. So broken out into three different pieces here. So what we see, why it matters, and why does it keep happening? So there's a lot of things that are going on. You'll see a lot of things about Model Context Protocol, MCP, but these challenges are faced in other ecosystems as well, like A2A and some of the other trust models that are being proposed for AI and identity pieces. So some of the things like shadow MCPs or unmanaged APIs, there's a lot of reinvention going on of saying, how do I manage identity and access? And drift. What happens is there's someone creates an MCP in a large organization, and they may not know this already existed. And there's opportunity for just divergence as opposed to convergence on this. And provenance. So this word means, do you understand where it came from? Do you know the ancestry of it? And once you have some clarity around those things, or instrumentation around it, then we have an opportunity to improve things. And why it matters is all these things around the security element and identity. Do you want data? We want to avoid data exfiltration, prompt injection. So the quality of the tools that we use deeply matters. And when you assess the quality, that it still remains the same tool. So rug pull is about saying you approved one thing, but really it's doing another. And the impersonation problem. And supply chain compromise. Very big topic. Not everything comes as Docker containers. Not everything is Python. Not everything is Node.js. So the origins matter, because that's how problems creep in. The compliance gaps and audit failure or challenges that we see are when an organization says, let's everyone do things with MCP, but we want to have some perimeters around this. We want to put our arms around it. And we want to comply with certain practices and principles organizationally. That's not always the case, and not easy. So by trying to enumerate the challenges that we're talking about, gives us some context of where does OpenID Federation have an opportunity to play. So multilateral is the notion versus bilateral is the notion that you trust a set of things, or you can establish trust within a set. Bilateral is I trust this to that. So this to that over and over again. So why additionally it repeats is not all the clients that you connect to MCPs, do they do any pre-flight validation? And when you think of the sprawl that's going on, it's like everyone is super excited to get going, but it's just off in all directions. So let's talk about some of these things. If there's one thing today I would like to leave you with, is Federation guides who to trust, and the other technology of OAuth and OpenID Connect still decides what you can do. This is the hallmark of Federation. It gives you this guiding light. Additionally, there's a corollary here. It might be a little provocative. The registries assist in calculating or assist on the trust calculus, but it's not comprehensive. It's my observation that it's not portable across protocols. Like if you wanted to establish trust in the MCP ecosystem, is that able to be used elsewhere in like a A2A? Not necessarily. So there's that, as well as runtime obligations to scale. So if you have a registry and everything points to that one, what happens when and everyone points to that one? If you have that problem, you're going to have some runtime obligations to stay performant. So there's some opportunities here. My take on this is that registries and OpenID Federation complement each other, and they could amplify each other's value because they have a division of labor that says OpenID Federation is dealing with the trust story, but the actual registry of things, and we'll get to that in a moment, is really best dealt with a registry or complemented there. OpenID Federation is a trust fabric. What happens is you have trust anchors, much like you have CAs, and is reminiscent of public key infrastructure or PKI. What happens is that you have trust anchors, and trust anchors may or may not have intermediates, and then they sign entity statements. And so when the entity and that is delivered to the entity that it's being signed for by the trust anchor, and then that's used at runtime. We won't talk today about how does that happen because there's a lot of different ways you could do it, but we're going to talk about what happens when these things are in place and the trust is available. So the trust is delivered as a set of trust marks inside a JWT attestation. This indicates, this trust mark, and we'll get into it in a moment, is a great way to signal a membership or a conformance to something happened. So a bunch of things happen to get that mark, and it's portable across domains. So it's not, this trust mark is only for example.com. This trust mark is production, or it is independent of the domain. They can or can't, it's up to the whoever uses and organizes and manages the trust mark to deem what's necessary. Anyone verifying the trust between these entities, and I'll get into this in a moment, needs to validate that the trust mark is intact. So the chain evaluates cryptographically properly, and that once you have it, then you can transact. So on the web, this is often seen in a browser world where you have your browser says, hey, you're trying to go to a website that doesn't have that trust anchor in my certificate store. Do you really want to connect to that? Because I don't know if I trust it, because I don't know who signed that HTTPS endpoint. So here is very similar, is that the trust mark is available in the JWT, and that's the evaluation. So after evaluating, and let's assume you accept, when you transact, you start using OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, authorization codes, PKCE, and strict audience uses. So the token remains per recipient. So and ideally you would have, if there's no trust mark, you don't want to connect. That's not the lay of the land today, and there's an opportunity here to take advantage of OpenID Federation and enhance the trust story. The JWTs are consumable, good news, with any of the existing libraries, and they don't interrupt any of the existing ways of using the APIs or any of those things. So if you have existing OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 integrations, they'll still function, and it's an and. So if you want to take advantage of OpenID Federation, it's built on top of that. Maturity. A lot of conversations start with, this sounds really great, but who's using it? So there's a number of places that are already using it. In Italy, there's the public digital identity system that has deployed this at nation level scale, and that is OpenID Federation is the backbone for that trustworthiness between the entities. OpenID for verifiable presentations for wallet management also has this baked into the specification where you can have different credentials or multiple formats of the creds that can be exchanged. For today, we'll be talking about just keeping it simple. And I'll have an example in just a few moments. eduGAIN is from the R&E sector where I typically hail from, and OpenID Federation has, eduGAIN is a service that has over 10,000 unique SAML entities, of which over 60% of those are identity providers, and that links the research and education system worldwide. And what's happening there is the multilateral SAML2 ecosystem is going to have another technology, the OpenID Federation, connected into it to help represent that same parity of trust. So the protocol is mature enough to deploy at nation level services. Implementations are going to have different maturity levels on how they're taking advantage of things. And that's the opportunity. We have the ability to take advantage and not wait for the many months, years to bake another specification. It's available now, can be used. So let's talk some more about that. Some of the use cases, if we sharpen our pencils on this, is that you can start getting some really great solutions about where does trust matter and how can it help me unlock a problem or unblock a problem. So the trusted MCP server story is the thing. You don't want to be able to connect to a nefarious MCP server. So if there was a way that you could evaluate that, wouldn't that be great? Additionally, the DevSecOps side of things, or software bill of materials, is an important aspect as well. So that what's inside the box matters. So if you have a trust mark attesting that the server runs a certain image or has gone through a verification process from a corporate standpoint, that's an awesome way of handling things. Additionally, when you talk about functional levels of authority, that that domain doesn't have to be something like .com or .example or .org. It could be development, production, or staging, for instance. You can have different trust marks on the same MCPs or endpoints and say, well, I serve these ones, and if you have this designation of you're in the group, you're in the trust, you have the trust mark for these areas, we're going to transact. Federation of One is a story where you get to use all the same benefits of federation, except that you get to use it for you. So it's same technology, same thing, but you operate your own trust mark. You get to mix and match, you get to bake your own cake on this one. You could say, I want this, and I want to assign it to my set of trust. There's an opportunity here to make this equally accessible to the individual as it is to the enterprise. Also, inside what goes over the wire, inside the JWT and what signals, could also be things like license marks, or other things such as activation keys or ability to opaque out some of the values that only are consumed by the endpoints. These are more sophisticated kind of uses, but nonetheless they're available, and this is a direction that I'm looking into on how we can take advantage of it if it's worthwhile pursuing it all. Crypto agility, it's not about Bitcoin. This is about being ready for quantum risks. And the PQ, when there's a quantum day that happens, that we have to roll keys. You don't want to have to tear down the infrastructure and rebuild. You don't want to have to wait, I got to wait 12 hours because that's how long it takes to get the key out there. No. You want to be able to roll the keys that much more quickly. And it's also one of the reasons that OpenID Federation was worked on in the first place, is getting that ability to be more rapid without breaking. To recap a bit, trust marks are evidence of what was done to earn its assignment. So if you are making think of it as like a contract. If you're going to participate and I'm going to have my trust on this, you're going to expect me to do a certain thing to enforce that, and reciprocally, I want whatever I'm giving that trust to or assigning it and say, yep, you meet the qualifications. It works in both directions. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Additionally, the clients, they should feel secure as opposed to, I'm just going to connect. This is an important aspect and something we should be more vigilant on, because right now, if you have a way to connect to an MCP, you don't have a way to verify that it's a safe MCP. You got to run it first. So there's a chicken and egg kind of problem there, but wouldn't it be good if that whoever is going to do the verification takes care of that safety measure and says, yep, it passes all these things, it has the trust mark, you should be able to connect to it safely. To give an idea of what is different in the OpenID Federation space is, here's the existing MCP flow. I'm not necessarily going to go through all the steps, but I'm going to call your attention to the very first part here. So when the user logs in and does the token exchange and that authorization happens, it's an authorization. It doesn't tell you, should I trust this? That's what's really different in the OpenID Connect Federation space. So when we look at the flow, the first thing that happens, and what happens here in this case, I have a client, I've called it Fed Manager Gateway Client, and it's going to make a pre-flight decision. So it's going to ensure that the issuer keys and any reference trust marks are valid and are the ones that it wants to use. Then it is going to apply a policy locally. It said, is this the right stuff? Is the trust chain intact? And then if it isn't, it's going to say, stop, don't connect. You don't have to connect. But if it is, let's continue transacting, and then the regular flow happens. And then the begin standard message exchange format happens. So this is where you invoke your tools, all sorts of things. So what does this look like? Let's take a look. We're going to break out of this. We're going to jump into my environment where I already have a VS Code boilerplate running from some of the code base I have with a Docker Compose that has the gateway client and an example MCP. So when I did a Docker Compose up, it brought those two services online at localhost, and you'll notice here that I'm showing right now on my screen the error 403. The token validation failed. It's because the trust chain didn't work because it had aged out in my case. And then what I did is I restarted it, and then I signed in, and we'll do that again just right now. Let's see if we can reproduce either a pass or a fail on this. So I'm going to refresh the page. I'm not signed in. Interesting aside, just because I'm not signed in here doesn't mean my token expired in the VS Code. It probably has a lifetime of about an hour. So there's a whole thoughts around token refresh and all those kinds of things. That's for a later date, sorry. So when I click this button, what's going to happen, I've already registered this localhost service in GitHub as a localhost endpoint, and I've already done an exchange. So it knows that this is, air quotes, to be authorized, has the ability to be authorized. And now I'm signed in, and a token has been reminted with the trust mark. So when I go to the MCP server, so this is not the MCP protocol just yet. This is just a web server that is saying, hey, I'm going to have some APIs, and you've given me a bearer token that shows that you have these things in your token. You have a trust anchor at localhost 3001. You have the Federation integration is active. The MCP ID is MCP demo. And there's my token. So if I wanted to look at the MCP endpoints, if I want to test the health on it, this is just an API. These are just API calls right now. Just some basic tests. Now, let's go use it in VS Code. So what we're going to do, Control A, Control C, Alt Tab. So much like that happens with any other token, they ask you to cut and paste it into the authorization header. And that's what we're doing here. Control save. We're going to start. Let's check our terminal here. Oh, we have quite a bit of scroll. There we go. Just for that kick, so I'm going to restart. Nice. Discovered 4 tools. Great. Let's go with our terminal. And so when you look at these, I'm just going to move my head to here. There we go. What happens now is I have already plumbed in MCP demo. So I have different commands I could use and I should be able to do that. So what's happening now is it's using that bearer token and going to go and verify against the MCP. It said, yeah, is this who I am? Well, that's great. Now I could do something interesting and ask it, is this the same author as this code base? So now you can interact with the identity information and actually do some computations. So yes, I am the author of this. This is using the Copilot in VS Code, using the MCP I just built, using a Federation token to sign in, and then illustrating my identity and say, yep, that's who this is. Now, there's a lot more to this in the back end to illustrate some more integrity and some more intense scrutiny that we can do here. But I think it's a great exemplar of what can happen with identity when you're instrumented in the with the OpenID Federation. So you'll notice an absence of some of the things in my example, for instance, such as production, staging, or what have you. If I didn't have the right token signed JWT with the necessary things and I wasn't entitled to be here, it wouldn't connect. You're not welcome here. Thanks for coming, but you're not there. Additionally, if I'm the client and I'm saying, hey, can I connect to this? It wouldn't connect because it wouldn't reveal my information. So let's get back to our presentation side. Oh, wrong screen. Thanks for your patience. Jumps right to the front. Let's take a jump here. We talked about these things. Let's talk about the deployment patterns, which we kind of already seen. And that is the audience of one. So I had one endpoint, I signed into GitHub, and the trust anchor in this boilerplate of code base that I have is got one MCP and it has the gateway. And what I did is I built my own certificate authority and I registered the entity. In this case, the gateway remints the JWT with the trust mark. Then I copied it into the VS Code, and then you saw what happens. So this is a great approach if you have a plethora of MCPs that you want to shunt or shuttle through a proxy. So one MCP proxies the other. There's lots of solutions out there that gives you the opportunity to adjudicate what's going on. Now, there's another school of thought, which is, well, I want to have this diverse set of MCPs, but I also want the person to interact with them directly, not through a proxy. I want you to demonstrate, yeah, this is you, and then go do things. In that case, what happens is if you want to truly take advantage of OpenID Federation and the cross-domain capabilities in that scenario, you're going to want something to deal with re-audiencing the token and a token exchange story this is still under exploration right now, at least from my part, and re-audience this. And that means you could re-audience the OAuth 2 authorization. Yeah, I think so. And then have it appropriately be an agreement across domains. There's another activity for RSE in flight to do the same kind of thing, but limited in scope to the IDP that you authenticated at. In the case where you heard me talk about research and education, and maybe other places where you have collaboration across organizations, you may want to authorize there and say, yes, I'm in partner agreement A, and you want to be able to transact in each other's MCP endpoints or those AI endpoints, and you want just universal access because you're part of that contract. You can do that, but you have to have the audience agree in the actual token in order to remain integrity and have those safety checks. So there's more here. Crawl walk stages right now, and we're going to just jump to the next place. So that's the presentation I gave today. There was some other Q&A that was going on, And I'm really interested in hearing what kind of things you're interested in. If you have a use case or if you want to explore this more, let me know. I'm definitely interested. The audience of one gateway endpoint, very interesting on how to scale it up very quickly and very easily because you keep it simple. You have a way to do that. And it works both from like a corporate HQ standpoint as well as an individual standpoint where you want to assemble your own things. And when you think of the standard I/O connection or the local connection that some of the MCPs advocate for, where it doesn't have any network out there and it reduces the configuration effort to putting your API keys into your stuff at localhost or on the local host itself, this audience of one is, I think, super valuable and elevates the trust story. The token exchange stuff that we just talked about briefly is, I'd say, vNext, or what are we going to do there? And what you saw in the demo is a code base I'm working on, such that we can have a demo federation that is Docker compose up, and you have an instant CA, an example of one or more MCPs, and then you can add these entity statements. But we're in the crawl, walk, run stage right now, and where can we take this next is also of interest to me, because there's the registry work going on with Anthropic, and I believe there's another way we can get in requests to elevate the trust, or another profile through the SEP process on requesting enhancements. You heard me use the word profile. So think of this as an and, not an or. So it's not about changing what you may already be doing. It's when you want to augment and elevate trust, there's an opportunity here. You may find yourself desiring to live in the trust-only space because of the security considerations about what MCPs you're going to connect to, and are you going to trust them? You get the opportunity to ask the question, should I trust this? And I think that's where things are at. And I want to say, here are some of the references about some of the things you've seen today, as well as I want to say thanks. There's some really interesting things to go about here. And, interesting. We'd love to hear from you, and thanks for watching.